Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for being here with us and having us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
The world wake up one day and a small little child by the name Alan Kurdi face down in the sand, dead on the beach in Turkey. And even though this is not new, this is something that's been happening for the last 3-4 years.
On an enormous scale.
Absolutely. The world reacted on a big scale to this situation of the refugees. It seems to the Canadian public that the opposition more focusing on bringing more refugees here, while the Conservative Party is more focusing on dealing with the source of the problem and the roots of the problem, which is fighting ISIS and our military mission. If there is a middle ground here.
Well, we're actually focused on both. I think the middle ground is actually our ground. First of all, I think the backdrop needs to be clear. Canada, in terms of refugees resettlement, obviously immigration generally, we are the biggest receiver of newcomers per capita in the world by far, including in refugee resettlement. In terms of the present Iraqi-Syrian situation, we've already admitted some 23,000 refugees, and I announced earlier in the campaign, before this story even broke, I'd announced the government of Canada wants to bring in more refugees. But I've said all along, we can't solve this problem through refugee policy alone. There are 15 million refugees and displaced persons in this region. There's no possible way of solving it through refugee policy. We obviously have been doing refugee policy, and we're doing more, and we will be doing more, but we're also providing humanitarian aid. We're one of the biggest funders in the world in absolute dollars of humanitarian aid to the region. Most of the people are still on the ground there and needing our help. And of course, we're also part of the international coalition fighting ISIS, because we already have 15 million refugees. If we don't stop this group from spreading, we're going to have tens and tens of millions of more. So the Conservative Party believes we have to do all those things. The other parties are arguing, for reasons that frankly they've never really articulated, that they would not fight ISIS. They would not fight ISIS.
Sure.
Why? Why? What's the reason for that? How would that help? That's absolutely beyond me. But we're the ones with a balanced policy on this.
Fighting ISIS is not just a matter, or defeating ISIS is not just a matter of the arm, like fighting the enemy itself with a weapon and military mission, but is the ideology, the ideology of hatred and violence. And quite frankly, Mr. Prime Minister, you can see that this ideology even start to reach us here home in our Canadian soil. What we can do and what your government will be doing to fight this ideology?
Well, look, I think the first thing that's important is we actually say that. Our government condemns violent jihadism and the jihadist terrorism it provokes. I don't think it helps. The other leaders won't even pronounce the word violent jihadism. They won't even say it. This is terrorism with a motive. And we have to be frank about what it is. It's a perversion of the Islamic faith, but it is what it is, and we have to call it for what it is and be prepared to take it on. We have in Canada anti-radicalization programs. I think there's probably no country in the world where there's better cooperation between our security agencies and those communities that are most vulnerable to this kind of ideology. But that's exactly what we have to do. We have to call it for what it is, and we have to tackle it at its source, and we are doing that.
Mr. Prime Minister, when I came here, my background is Egyptian. When I came here, I came as a refugee, faced persecution because of my Christian belief. And I'm one of the very blessed people to receive the Canadian citizenship. I think one of the funny stories, when the Canadian judge asked me what the first thing I want to do as a Canadian, I told him, Your Honor, I want to drink beer, watch hockey, and complain about the weather. So he told me, son, you're a true Canadian. But there is many refugees from different minorities, such as the Christians, the Yazidis, the Baha'is, the Uyghurs, the Falun, the Tibetans, and quite frankly, even the moderate Muslims that facing persecution right now. How Canada, or what Canada can do to promote freedom of religion inside Canada and internationally?
Well, first of all, a couple of things. On the particular crisis we're facing now, when I say we're bringing in, have brought in lots of refugees and we're going to bring in more, our focus is on bona fide refugees, and in particular on vulnerable religious and ethnic minorities. These are the groups that are at most risk and most need our help, both Muslim minorities and non-Muslim minorities. That's where our focus has been. More broadly, the Government of Canada has been trying to promote religious freedom and religious tolerance as a fundamental value around the world. We formed the Office of Religious Freedom precisely to do this. under Dr. Andrew Bennett. It's worked closely with representatives of those vulnerable communities in this country. During this campaign, I've announced some additional resources for them to pursue enhanced programming, particularly in the Middle East. But look, what I would say, these are the things that we need to do. You know, I've said this before, in the last couple of decades, we've tried many places to promote democracy just by having elections. And of course, you know, what often happens is just, extremists or bad dictators win elections. You know, we had Hamas, we had Morsi in Egypt. You've got to do more than that. You've got to create the conditions for democracy. And we've been focusing on two. One is the rights of women. Women have human rights and respect, and that has all kinds of effects in terms of the nature of political dialogue and the way children are treated, but also religious tolerance. Because if you have a political society where basically the view is, you know, God's on one side, anybody who thinks differently needs to be killed, you cannot have a democracy in that kind of a society. So that's why the Office of Religious Freedom has been one of our big initiatives.
Mr. Prime Minister, it was an honor and pleasure meeting you, and thank you for the opportunity for this interview.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.